On the day of his death, Adam Jaminski worked in his lab. He had moved on from plans of destructive worldwide renewal and instead went to work researching how to safely dispose of the cataclysmic bombs he had constructed in his youth. His work was interrupted by a burst of a strange mechanical flashing noise. Adam paused and listened. He turned to face the door beside him, and he stood silently watching the entrance to a supply closet. Again, another mechanical flash, followed by two more. He approached the door slowly, and yet another flash followed. He opened the door to be greeted with what looked like a gun pointed directly at his face. Adam's hands shot up into the air. "Sit." The man holding the gun directed him, gesturing toward a nearby chair. The man holding the odd gun was wearing a cloak, and a dark hood covered his face. Standing behind the cloaked man stood four other men. One, a familiar face, the blond, coat-wearing man from the orphanage. Near him stood a pale man with red eyes wearing a stark black suit and red tie. Next to him was a man wearing dark sunglasses and a black hoodie, with yellow technological designs patterned throughout it. And beside him stood a man who looked confused and out of place. He wore a blue flannel, a purple shirt, and red sneakers. Adam sat down in a dusty plastic chair in the corner of the supply closet, and as he did, the man in the black suit snapped his fingers, seemingly causing the door to slam shut. "What's going on here?" Adam stuttered. "Don't speak, Adam," the cloaked man interrupted. "You're getting a second chance." "No, please, I changed. That's not me anymore. Adam desperately tried to prevent the inevitable. "I don't care," the cloaked man interrupted. "What's about to happen here is something very important. Nothing you can say will stop the inevitable." The cloaked man paused and held his fist to his face. He lowered his hand and continued. "You're going to change, Adam. You're done with this miserable life. Isn't that exciting?" "What do you mean? You're not going to kill me, are you? You said you're giving me a second chance. I don't know what's..." Adam faltered. The cloaked man pointed the gun at Adam's head and looked away. "You must protect those you once deemed unworthy. And in this new life, that is your duty. Au revoir." The cloaked man pulled the trigger, and with a flash of light and that same old mechanical blast, all five of the strange men had vanished. Adam pressed his hands against his face, screaming in pain. Matrona burst into the room. She screamed, but when she saw the glow of purple between Adam's fingertips, her fear was washed away with excitement. This was the moment she was promised. "Matrona!" Adam screamed. "Help me!" Matrona stood back and waited. Right when her faith was beginning to waver, this moment solidified that her patience was vindicated. Adam did not need her help. Adam lifted his face from his hands, and a beam of bright purple fire burst from the wound. Purple flames engulfed his body, and Matrona ducked for cover. Adam fell to the ground and curled himself up, rolling around on the floor, body still lit aflame with burning purple. The flames slowly dissipated. Adam's brain numbed with a mental fog. He shivered as a twinge through his spine cleared his mind. An overwhelming sense of déjà vu pulsed in his head. Adam's clothes had nearly burnt all the way off. He shuddered and pulled his arms away from his face, revealing it to Matrona as his eyes darted to her. Adam's face was young, new. Adam wasn't Adam anymore. He tugged his thick black hair and felt his clean-shaven, smooth-skinned face. His complexion had darkened a shade or two. His eyes were larger, younger. He spoke, with an unfamiliar voice. "Where am I? Who are you?" "I'm Matrona." Matrona held her hand out for a handshake. Instead, Adam grabbed her arm and pulled himself up. Now standing, he looked down, then up again at Matrona. He covered himself. "I don't... clothes? Oh, right." Matrona left the room. Adam sat down on the chair and held his hands to his head. He darted his eyes around the supply closet, searching for a morsel of familiarity. All he could conjure in his mind were facts and figures. Knowledge he had learned somewhere, somehow, but nothing personal whatsoever. He knew physics, quantum mechanics, he knew words and phrases, but people, events, anything equating a sense of self evaded him. Matrona came back into the room and handed Adam a blue flannel, a purple shirt, a pair of jeans, and a pair of red sneakers. Adam looked at them as if he were remembering something, then dismissed the thought. "Thanks," he stammered as he awkwardly stood up and took the clothes. Matrona looked away as he put them on. "I'm gonna ask again, because after thinking it over, I still have no idea, but where am I?" "This is your lab. I'm your friend, Matrona." "I have a lab? That's cool." Adam left the room and returned to his lab. He sat at a counter and thought some more. Matrona watched him from the supply closet. She could tell he needed some time, and she snuck away, giddy in her steps. Adam sat, unable to move as he was paralyzed with choices. He felt like a child born with the brain of an adult with none of the experience to know how to properly use it. A mechanical flash sounded in the room. Adam swiveled in his stool and was surprised to see a man standing before him. The man wore a dark red leather jacket over a blue shirt. A necklace dangled a small purple crystal around his neck. He ran his fingers through his styled brown hair and put his hands in his pocket. The man approached Adam. "Hey," Adam began. "Where did you come from? Who are you?" "Hey to you too." The strange man slid blueprints onto the counter. "These are for you. You've been given a job. More of a civic duty, really. You've made some mistakes in your past life. This one will be dedicated to protecting others. You'll become a guardian, preserver, patron, a defender, a sentinel, if you will. And you'll need this." The man gestured toward the blueprints. "With your scientific prowess, it shouldn't be too hard to construct. The more obscure elements needed for its production are concealed in this bag." The man placed a plastic baggie full of purple crystals and other strange materials on the counter. "Now get to work." The strange man walked away, and Adam was left with a task. With what little he knew of his life, he thought that maybe he could be someone important. It bothered him that he didn't know his name. He thought about what the man said. "The Guardian," he thought to himself out loud. He was thinking of a name to call himself. "The Defender," he said in a deep, menacing voice. Two on the nose, he said to himself. "The Preserver? No. The Patron? That doesn't make much sense." Matrona walked back into the room. She smiled from ear to ear when she saw the blueprints on the counter. The longer she waited, the more she feared that her optimistic outlook was built on a foundation of lies. But seeing these blueprints, somehow even more than seeing her father change into a new person, confirmed that her waiting wasn't for nothing. "What are you thinking about?" Some guy said I was supposed to be the protector of something, I guess. It sounded important. It felt important. He pointed to his heart. "Right in here. Anyway, he wanted me to make this, so, hey, I don't happen to have a name, do I? I feel like most people would, by now anyway." "You don't?" Seems about right. I don't seem to have much else." "How's the Guardian, or the Preserver, sound?" "I think the first sounds too blatant, and the second makes me sound like I make foods last longer." "They sound like they aren't names," Matrona chuckled. "Why not the Sentinel?" she suggested. "That doesn't sound very namey either, but sure it works." The Sentinel, as he decided to call himself now, looked down at the blueprints. "Thanks," he mumbled to Matrona as he began to decipher the instructions for the device illustrated on the blueprints. "Don't mention it." Matrona smiled and walked away with a wide smile, knowing what would happen next. The Sentinel spent weeks trying to build the machine the blueprints were for. Matrona checked in impatiently from time to time, but mostly kept to herself. The Sentinel's frustration was only fueled by the fact that he didn't know what he was even making. The materials used to create the device itself confused him. Amber? Bronze? Basic materials like these, but then sure, why not throw in some crystalline plasma shards or dark matter just to make things complicated? His lab wasn't made for this. He spent an entire week retrofitting his lab for the construction of a machine he didn't even understand, and for an unknown purpose. Though the Sentinel didn't know himself, so any purpose was one worth pursuing. Stringing together a thick bronze cube wireframe and placing in square faces of amber, the Sentinel prepared himself for what the instructions indicated was the last step. When the Sentinel snapped the core in, the cube began to glow. The cube, comprised of 6 orange faces with a yellow circle in the center of each and a quarter circle slice backed into every corner of each face, connected to the central circle by bronze rods, sat before him, doing nothing but glowing. The Sentinel sat and waited for the strange cube to do anything at all. "Sure, yeah, great. I made a complicated lamp," he thought out loud. The Sentinel picked up the blueprints and read the creator's notes on a sticky note. The messy handwriting was hard to read, but he could almost make out one line of semi-comprehensible instructions. Hold the machine and think. Think of a specific time and a specific place. The Sentinel stood up, holding the cube in his hands. He tried to think of a place and time. He thought about what he remembered before he became his new self. He vaguely remembered purple flames and strange men. The cube glowed violently, and in a flash of blinding light, leaving behind the echoes of a mechanical flashing sound, the Sentinel had vanished. He reappeared in his supply closet. He looked around frantically, spotting a man wearing shades and a dark hoodie with yellow designs, a red-eyed man in a pitch-black suit and red tie, a cowboy-esque blonde man in a light brown trench coat, and a mysterious man in a black hooded cloak. "Wait a second," the Sentinel whispered to himself. An old man walked into the room, and the door snapped shut. "Adam?" the Sentinel whispered under his breath. All sound drained from the Sentinel's ears as he relived that moment. Time slowed to a halt. He watched as he, Adam Jaminski, changed into the Sentinel right before his eyes. In a blinding flash of light, accompanied by a splitting headache, the Sentinel teleported back to the lab counter. He tried to put together what had just happened. Flashing echoes flooded through his mind. The life of the man left behind seeped into the Sentinel's memories. The events were clouded as if they weren't his, as if he were remembering them as a bystander. He knew that he had changed. He knew that he used to be Adam Jaminsky. He did have a name, and it was cursed. He fell forward and held himself up in the lab counter as memories flooded in. He gasped as he knocked over the contents of his desk. He fell back as if hit by some invisible force, and swore under his breath, collecting himself. The Sentinel stood up, holding his hands up to his head. "Sentinel?" Matrona ran into the room. "What is it?" Wide-eyed, the Sentinel placed his hands on Matrona's shoulders. Looking her straight in the eyes, he mumbled something in a crazed state, too quiet for Matrona to hear. "What?" Matrona scanned his face for answers. "I think I built a time machine.